From that in just a few moments again. Another part that will lead up to what? Kind of continuation of what we were just reading a while ago. But before we get into that, a couple questions to ponder here to kind of set the stage. If I were to ask you, what does the Islam religion, for instance, represent to you? What image do you conjure up in your mind? I'm sure that you get a variety of different responses. Most of it, if not all of it, would be because of what you've seen in the media, unless you happen to know someone personally. And so everything that we understand about the Islam religion pertains to terrorist, beards and long hair, and unusual, almost can describe a hickey that way, but that's of age past. But as you're thinking about these things, all that we know about that is what we see on TV. We don't really know that much about it. And that's not to say one way or another about anything or anyone on that, but just to bring up to mind that we don't know much. And what we do know, when we conjure up in our mind, is because of what we've seen on TV. Now, on the other side, most of you, if not all of you, know something about Christianity. And when I say Christianity, automatically, there's 1,000 images that come to your mind. Many of you from childhood up and being in little kids' classes and singing the little kids' songs and vacation Bible school and youth activities and adult activities, and on and on. And so we have firm things that really direct us into that. But if you ask somebody out in the world that's really never been into a church building in their entire life, what do you think about Christianity? Strangely enough, you think in our United States there wouldn't be people that would have unusual scripts in that, but there are. Tara, my daughter in California, talks about the number of people that she meets that have never been in church building and really know nothing at all about Christianity. Don't even know if they've really met anybody Christian in their mindset, other than what they see on TV. In other words, is their image. So, here's where I'm headed. Imagine, if you will, that your perspective of Christianity is all of what you see on TV. What kind of image would you have about Christianity? Well, it depends on what channels you just happen to pause on, because chances are, if that's where you're getting it, you're not going to stay there very long. I don't. What interests me more than anything else is when I'm flipping the channels and I happen to latch on to something being preached on in Spanish, because I like to perk my Spanish just a little bit, and I'm curious where the guy's headed. But I don't stay there very long, honestly. Because I have my own studying I like to do. Unless the person really is good, I move right on. And I can imagine how the rest of the world feels when they latch into it, and they find all kinds of ideas about Christianity. So here's what I'm saying is they're going to quickly move past it. Now, Chuck Van Eaton this morning made reference to a large billboard, I guess it is, in Times Square, and a picture of Santa Claus on one side and something related to Christianity on the other side. I don't know if it's a nativity scene or what. And one of them talking about being married, and the other one describing something about it's a myth. And there are people in our United States that are very much against Christianity, and I think at least in part because everything they know about Christianity is what they've seen on TV. Maybe sampled some unusual things here and there, enough just to verify it. I don't want anything to do with us. Let's rethink this just for a moment and look at it maybe from an old type mindset, and let's refresh our thinking about what Christianity is about. Because if we really represent Christianity the way it's described, I don't think we're going to get the attacks Now, we may have many people not wanting to believe in it, but I think it'd be more along the lines of what John Stossel had commented, that John Pack referred to this morning, that, again, a person who said he didn't really know much about Christianity, but he was always enticed by it. Because everybody he ever met, at least in his studies, in analyzing things, had a good representation of what Christianity ought to be. And that was encouraging to him. Well, so here we are in Philippians 2. And what we're looking at is oftentimes described as the mind of Christ. Now it starts, before it gets to that phrase in verse 5 about have this mind in you which was in Christ, it starts a little bit before that. And I'm going to back up and read verses 3 and 4 to start into that. And maybe dwell longer there, and not a lengthy time tonight, but enough to get us something about Christianity. Mainly because, boy, while you're out Christmas shopping, some of these people can really test you. Or trying to just maneuver through the parking. And you find your behavior being challenged. Walking in the door into the mall. And are competing over what, but that's just the same thing, the beginning of it. Satan's really out to do a lot more than that in testing. But here's what he says in verse 3, Paul does. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition. I want to focus on that word nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, I can't imagine a nothing, because my mind always conceives of something. If they say nothing, I think, well, if you look in a box and there's nothing, but you've got a box to look in. But absolutely nothing. Let nothing be done out of selfish ambition. Every motive that I have encourages me to do something. Paul will write to the Corinthian church, to this church that in that day and time had so many miraculous gifts that I don't believe really exist today, but they did back then. I definitely believe they did. But they had so many they were competing over. And so out of that, they were totally abusing the idea of miraculous gifts. God had given it to them to preach the word, and prophecy, and translation of tongues, and tongue speaking, and all that. And it became more of a show for them. I'm more spiritual than you are. I'll prove it by doing it. And that's not at all what Paul says. And so he says, now, if you speak with the tongues of men and of angels, that means you got the best message there ever is. You speak with the tongues of men and angels, and you have not love. If I use these just for a minute, you're like sounding brass and clanging cymbals. Not worth much, in other words. It's a lot of noise, but it doesn't communicate much. So there's got to be another side to even the best that we do. Let nothing, absolutely nothing, be done by selfish motives. Our society is built on enticing people. Christmas. There was a cartoon, I forget who sent it to me, or saw it. It was a picture of a couple or a family actually sitting at a Thanksgiving Day table, and the turkey's getting carved and all this, and right behind them was reindeer and Santa Claus in their cartoon, things like, come on, let's get through eating because we got some stuff to do. I mean, our society is pushing materialism and pushing getting things, and this cartoonist was just giving his reaction to that. And there's so much more out there that causes us to think, if you'll do this, you'll get that. Come by here and you'll get this too. And so they're prompting or enticing our selfish motives. As you know, my wife teaches second grade. And if the kids behave real well, and they got to do pretty good at this, they get a blue card. which is nothing more than a piece of construction paper trimmed out in a little trim fashion. They also get red cards if they really mess up. Now, if you get a blue card, you get to, at certain times of the week, shop in a box that has little gadgets and guns and whatever. But you have really, I mean, Melanie's tight. She doesn't let them have just one blue card for one. I mean, they've got to really have some extra blue cards to get these things. But here's the thing, that their motivation, a lot of times, is, I'll do this. Did I get a blue card for that? That's second grade. But that's kind of how we are. And Paul, to start with, says you've got to reformat your thinking. I do things because of selfish ambition. I shop certain places and bargain hunt because I want to pay less. I don't go shopping someplace so I can help somebody. I do what I get. It's how we are. And if I do something, I would like somebody to say, well, I appreciate what you're doing. If they don't, I'll probably keep doing it, but I don't know if I feel as good about it. Now, is that a selfish ambition? Maybe. Let nothing be done out of selfish ambition or conceit, boy, there's a loaded word, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Treat others better than you would like to be treated. And that's a tough one. Sometimes, some days we really got on, we can do that. But not always. And again, Satan has a way of testing our character in all these things. And then going on to verse 4, Paul just adds some more on here. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, because we know we're going to take care of ourselves, right? But also for the interest of others. It's almost like he's knocked it down just a notch, because, boy, we can't just always keep esteeming everybody. But he says, okay, while you're watching out for yourself, make sure that you watch out for other people. Now, if the world saw that in Christianity, instead of, I know I flipped a few channels back some time ago and seen some preachers, and they had the gold for glass and whatever. And when I got through listening to the message, I felt like if I would just send a little money to him, God would give me a whole lot. That was a selfish ambition if I ever heard it. That's why I'll donate to him. Matter of fact, as I've mentioned in times past, I still have in my office desk or at home, I forget now, where a wallet that my grandmother had gotten years ago. This is like when I'm a toddler. Looks like a brand new one. She never used it. That's Grandma for you. But it was given to her because she sent a gift to a TV preacher named Oral Roberts back in that day and time. Maybe you've heard of his name. And the reason I know it came from him is because on the inside of the wallet, it's stamped in gold. Something related to give to Oral Roberts and God will give back to you. And so what is being advertised here is nothing more than false teaching. And if that's what the world sees out there about Christianity, we've really got to do our job in being what we're to be to overcome all of that. Okay, so here's what Christ did. Verse 5. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So think like Jesus. Who being in the form of God didn't consider robbery to be equal with God. He was. Matter of fact, John 1, chapter 1 of the Gospel of John, verse 1 says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The next verse says, and the same was with God. All things were made through him, and without him, Nothing was made that had been made. Jesus being mentioned as the Word in that verse. Later on in verse 14, John clarifies, and the Word became flesh and lived among us. He's talking about Jesus. But way back then, He's God. Divine essence. And so here He is, being with God, equal to God, and He didn't feel like He was being robbed to lose that position. Would you feel robbed if everything you ever owned got taken away from you? Rick remarks once in a while about people he takes care of, and bless his heart, somebody out on the street, he said, I just invited them in. They needed a place. It's like, Rick, you crazy? I don't know. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. They stole my stereo, but I didn't have much else from the table. No. But robbery. You ever gotten something stolen from you? How do you feel? Jesus didn't mind. He didn't call it robbery even though he lost everything of the best. It wasn't fair. And I hear that like, oh, that wasn't fair. You treated me, and he didn't feel robbed. He traded it, as the next verse says here. But he made himself of no reputation. There's something important to us, our reputation. But he made of himself no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant. That's the guy that gets down on his knees and does the dirty jobs around the house or out in the field. A bondservant, and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Now, he didn't just come on this earth and die like you and I see so many do. But he came on this earth and he went through the most torturous death that the Roman government could ever come up with. And it was also the most humiliating one. And anybody that ever watched one of those things back in that day and time, I'm sure had very much embedded in their mind, don't do that. Just with whatever little clothes, if any, he had on, hanging there, being tortured. And he did all of that voluntarily. Now go back to what's being said, verses 3 and 4, and you see what's going on here. Let nothing be done out of selfish ambition. There wasn't anything that Jesus had to gain personally by coming down here and doing that. Absolutely nothing. Ramon, one of the first Argentines that I got to know after we moved to Argentina. A feriante, as they call him, the guy that sold in the little traveling markets. He moved their little trailer from this place to that place, and on Mondays he'd be in this place, and they decide on Tuesday they go this place, and they had a regular rotation. And so, not a big job, mind you. Okay. And big old guy. And Ramon, when I first met him in the feria, and of course it was real obvious that our Spanish wasn't very good, because we were pointing at things trying to buy from him in the marketplace. And through the little bit of Spanish that we knew, I communicated to him, answered his questions of, what are you doing here? And I said, we moved down here. And mind you, this was the poor neighborhood of Buenos Aires. 12 million people, and we couldn't afford to even stay in the middle class. This is the people that, when they had the ferias, that were out on the dirt streets in some locations. We were out with the poor. And that's just what we did. That's what we chose to do. But his comment was, what on earth did you do coming here? We're trying to go there. Jesus came here. There was no motivation to stay. He emptied himself. He didn't consider that being robbery. He comes down and he does all of this. Now, if the world can see that mindset in us, in spite of how we're treated, people take note. That doesn't mean they're just going to jump up to you real quick and say, hey, where do you go to church? But they're going to take note. It's going to make a difference in their life. They're going to recognize that person there, you could walk over them all day long, and they're not going to jump in your face. They may not like it. But they're going to keep watching out for your interests instead of their own. What is with these people? And that makes a difference. Now, as Christians, we're here really to represent Jesus more than anything else out of what we do. Teaching, of course, what the Scriptures teach. And by our personal life, representing Jesus. So if all they see, talking about the world now out there, if that's all they see about Christianity is of the negative fashion, the kind that's constantly judging people, condemning people, we'll let God take care of that part. We know that there's sin. We know that God doesn't like that. But if that's how we're going to treat people with our attitude, Christ loses. He didn't do that. Now we know that not everybody's going to heaven. Matter of fact, not the majority of the people are going according to what Jesus said. Let God sort that part out. We'll teach what His Word is, but our attitude needs to be what Jesus had. And so you'll find Him, strangely enough, comfortable with the sinners. So much so that the religious leaders of His time ridiculed Him for it. He's a friend of the sinners. And that was a good reputation. So, I don't mind thinking that about us. And in the end, here's what Jesus got, verse 9. After the death on the cross, into verse 8. Therefore, now in other words, the reason of all of these things is because God has also highly exalted Him and given Him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of those in heaven and of those on earth and of those under the earth, whoever those people are. Not sure exactly, but get the feeling he's talking about everyone when he says it. So here's this high physician Jesus